What if Ned Stark named Jon Snow his rightful heir, ignoring Catelyn's fury? The North would fracture, secrets would spill, and the wolves of Winterfell would turn on each other before the dragons ever came. The snows fell early that year in Winterfell, heavier than usual, blanketing the godswood and burying the training yard in silence. Jon Snow stood in the great hall, stiff and nervous, his dark curls dusted with frost, unaware that his entire world was about to change. Ned Stark's eyes, usually stern and unreadable, held something different today, something that made Catelyn pace behind him like a caged wolf. Robb was seated at the long table, confusion flickering across his face. Sansa and Arya had been sent away to their lessons, but Bran had stayed, climbing onto a chair too big for him. It was supposed to be a simple meal. Instead, it became a moment that cracked the North. Ned stood slowly, hands behind his back, his voice low but steady. "There is something I've carried for too long, a burden, and now a truth." His words fell into silence like stones in a frozen lake. "Jon is no bastard." Catelyn's lips tightened. "Eddard, don't," but he continued. "He is not my son by another woman. He is the son of my sister Lyanna, and Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. I claimed him to protect him from Robert's wrath. But the truth must live. And in my heart I have raised him as a Stark. He is my heir." The words burned through the air. Jon blinked. "What?" Robb stood up, the blood draining from his face. "Your heir? What about me?" Catelyn's voice rose like a dagger drawn. "You promised. You swore you'd never do this, Ned." But Ned faced only Jon now. "You are of ice and fire, boy, and more Stark than many who carry the name." "Okay, stop. Did you just feel your brain explode a little? Because we're already rewriting everything about the North, the Targaryens, and the war to come. But trust me, it gets so much crazier. And if you think Robb's gonna just accept this..." "Yeah, no." 3 days passed in cold silence. The halls of Winterfell echoed with tension. Robb no longer spoke to Jon, and Catelyn refused to eat at the same table. Whispers began to swirl among the bannermen. "A Targaryen in Winterfell. The king in the North replaced?" Ned Stark has lost his senses. Meanwhile, Jon wandered the crypts below Winterfell, the words "son of Rhaegar" bouncing in his skull like an echo he couldn't shut out. He knelt before Lyanna's statue, heart pounding. "Is this true?" he whispered, though he knew the answer already. Upstairs, Catelyn confronted Ned behind closed doors. Her voice was ice. "You've endangered all our children for him. The Targaryens burned the North, Ned. They took your father, your brother, and now you hand them Winterfell?" Ned didn't flinch. "I will not let my sister's son grow in shadows any longer. He is honorable, and he is worthy." "You mean he's useful?" she snapped. "The dragon's blood will make him a king." "Would that be so terrible?" he asked softly. "A king with honor." Wait, what? Did Ned Stark just say he'd support a Targaryen king? That's not just bold, it's treasonous in the eyes of the South, and in the North. It's a powder keg, because what happens when loyal houses must choose between Robb Stark and Jon Targaryen? The ravens flew. Word spread. House Umber refused to kneel to a dragon-blooded boy. Karstark sent back a blade instead of a letter. But House Mormont, led by young Lyanna, responded with a shocking message. If Jon Snow is Lyanna Stark's son, then he is of our blood, and the North remembers. Tensions boiled over when Robb challenged Jon in the training yard. Swords clashed under grey skies. No blood was spilled, but the wounds went deeper than steel. Robb's voice cracked as he shouted, "You're not my brother!" And Jon, breathing heavy, replied, "You never treated me like one. And this is the moment where everything starts unraveling, because down south, Varys hears the whispers, and suddenly the spymaster who once dismissed Jon Snow now sees him as a key. In King's Landing, Cersei tightens her grip. The Queen's fury knows no bounds when she learns that a Stark has elevated a Targaryen, her enemies both. This is treason wrapped in fur, she spits. In Dragonstone, Daenerys hears the name Jon Targaryen for the first time. She narrows her eyes. My brother had a son. Her voice trembles between fury and hope. And he lives? Meanwhile, Jon struggles to understand who he is. Bastard to heir, Snow to fire. His mind races with questions. Do I want a crown? Would the North even follow me? Can I trust myself not to become like him? Up in the tower, Ned watches it all unfold, the fracture lines, the storms gathering. He had made his choice to honor his sister's dying wish, but the cost. maybe too high. The wolves were turning on each other, and winter hadn't even begun, and here's the real kicker. Jon wasn't the only one learning the truth. Bran had seen visions in the weirwood dreams. Visions of Lyanna's blood-soaked bed, of Rhaegar placing a hand on her swollen belly, of Ned kneeling beside the Tower of Joy, sword drawn, his honor broken and reforged in silence. Littlefinger, always watching, always whispering, now had a new game piece to play. And Catelyn, still burning with betrayal, made a move no one expected. She sent a raven to Riverrun to her sister Lysa, with a single sentence. Ned has placed a Targaryen over our son. Act now or the North is lost. Boom. Just like that, the Game of Thrones resets, but guess what? That's only the beginning. And if you think you know where this goes next, buckle up. Want to know what happens when Daenerys sails north not as a conqueror but to meet her nephew, or when Robb Stark starts building alliances against his own father? You're not ready. Against his own father. You're not ready. The snowstorm that rolled over Winterfell the night Daenerys arrived was almost poetic, violent, beautiful, and impossible to ignore. Her ships had landed at White Harbor 2 weeks earlier, and rumors flew faster than ravens. The Dragon Queen comes, they whispered, to meet the wolf-blooded prince her brother left behind. But Daenerys didn't come for alliances. She came for answers, for truth, and maybe somewhere beneath it all for blood. Jon stood atop the battlements when her procession arrived, unsullied in perfect formation, grey cloaks stiff with frost, and behind them, 2 monstrous shadows slicing through the sky. Drogon and Rhaegal. The northern lords stood uneasy, hands on hilts, muttering prayers to the old gods. No one spoke it aloud, but every single one of them thought the same thing. What if the Targaryens burn the north again? Inside the great hall, firelight flickered across stone faces. Daenerys entered like a storm wrapped in silk. Silver hair, violet eyes, her crown glinting beneath the furs gifted by House Manderly. Jon approached her slowly, heart in his throat. "You're—" he began, unsure what word came next. "Aunt, queen, stranger, fire made flesh?" She tilted her head, studying his face. "You look like him, Rhaegar, the jaw, the eyes." She stepped closer. "But there's Stark in you, too. And you," he said, voice tight. "You came for—" "Me? I came for truth," she answered. "And to see if the last piece of my family still has a heart. Wait, just pause for a second. This is the moment right here where everything could shift. Peace, alliance, romance, or war? Because the look in Daenerys' eyes isn't just curiosity, it's calculation. She knows this Targaryen has the North's loyalty, that he was raised a Stark but born a dragon, and that makes him dangerous, maybe even more dangerous than her. Meanwhile, Robb Stark had not forgotten the slight. He refused to attend the feast in Daenerys' honor. Instead, he summoned bannermen loyal to him alone, Houses Glover, Serwyn, Tallheart. A quiet rebellion began to form in the shadows of Winterfell, just as snow buried the truth deeper each day. In a candlelit corner of the Godswood, Jon and Daenerys spoke again. She asked about Lyanna, about Ned, about the North, and Jon, still reeling from truths he hadn't asked for, gave her honesty. "My father raised me with honor. He taught me loyalty, duty. I thought I was his shame. Turns out I was his promise." Daenerys' breath hitched. "And what do you want now, Prince of the North?" He looked up at her, eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Peace and truth. That's all I've ever wanted." But just as tension between them softened, ravens arrived. From Riverrun, from the Vale, from the south. Catelyn's letter had spread like wildfire, and with it an accusation. Ned Stark has betrayed the North by elevating a dragon spawn. The wolf has been burned. Oh no. This is the powder keg moment. Because now the realm isn't just confused about Jon Snow. Now they're choosing sides. And with each letter, Robb's faction grows stronger. Because while some may accept a half-Targaryen Stark, others will never kneel to dragon's blood, no matter the man. In a hastily called war council, voices clashed. "He's no northern king," Lord Glover spat. "He's fireborn and fire kills." Lady Mormont stood, small but fierce. "He is Lyanna's son. That makes him one of us." But the loudest voice came from the one least expected, Sansa Stark, freshly returned from the Vale. Her red hair was pinned in the southern fashion now, her voice colder than the wind outside. "If Jon is to lead," she said, "he must choose. Is he a Stark or a Targaryen?" "He can't be both." Daenerys didn't flinch. "He is both. That's what makes him powerful. Jon's gaze darted between them. This isn't about power. It always is, Daenerys whispered. Back in King's Landing, Cersei sipped her wine slowly as Qyburn read the latest Raven aloud. 2 Targaryens now, she said amused. Perhaps they'll kill each other and save us the trouble. But she didn't laugh. No, she began planning, because if Jon Targaryen truly had the loyalty of the North and the love of Daenerys, the Iron Throne itself was at risk. And she would rather burn it down than lose it. In the shadows of Winterfell, Peter Baelish smiled as chaos spread. He fed whispers into Catelyn's ear, into Robb's. Let Jon take the black again, he suggested. Send him to the wall where he belongs. A Targaryen ruling the North? Unthinkable. But Jon had already made his decision. That night beneath the heart tree, he knelt before Ned's statue. I never asked for this. Never wanted a crown. But I won't run from it either. And then Daenerys appeared beside him. I've seen what happens when the world is ruled by men who only crave power, she said. But maybe we can change it. Together. Jon looked at her, torn between blood and loyalty, honor and desire. The fire between them crackled, but something darker loomed behind it, because Robb had declared it. From the battlements, in front of his own loyal lords, he raised his sword and said the words no brother should ever say. Jon Snow is no Stark. He is no Northman. He is no heir. He is a pretender. And if he stands in my way, I will cut him down myself. And just like that, the North was at war with itself. Steel rang against steel in the bitter wind, as the banners of House Stark, 2 wolves snarling at each other, were raised on opposite ends of the North. Robb's faction, based in the Dreadfort and fortified by allies furious over Jon's elevation, now called themselves the True North. Meanwhile, Jon held Winterfell, supported by House Mormont, the Manderleys, and smaller houses still loyal to Ned's word. The North, once united under a single cry, the North remembers, was now choking on its own memory. Tension turned to blood within weeks. Skirmishes broke out along the King's Road. Ravens were shot down mid-flight. Brothers fought each other outside village inns. The common folk didn't care if Jon was a Stark or a Targaryen. They only saw smoke on the horizon and dead men in their fields. Jon tried to prevent full-out war. He met with Robb beneath the weeping willow near the Shivering Sea, where their father once took them hunting. But the meeting was a disaster. You're not him, Robb said coldly, voice rough like cracked ice. You wear his name like armor, but you don't understand what it means. Jon's fists clenched. I never asked for his name. I never asked for any of this. But I'm not running from it. You were a brother to me, Robb said. But now, you're a threat to my people, my kingdom. I am your people, Jon replied. You think I'm the enemy because of blood I didn't choose? Robb's face twisted. No, I think you're the enemy because you still walk beside her. He meant Daenerys, because ever since her arrival, whispers had bloomed like rot. That she wanted the North for herself. That she would marry Jon to take Winterfell. That her dragons were not symbols of peace but of fire and death. And honestly, those rumors weren't wrong. Pause. Can we just take a second to feel the weight of that moment? Robb and Jon, who once stood side by side in every snow-covered fight, now stood on opposite ends of a blade. And not because they wanted to, but because Catelyn had forced the truth into the light, and because Daenerys had walked straight into the coldest kingdom in Westeros without bending a single knee. Meanwhile, Catelyn played her own game. She had already secured Lysa Arryn's support in secret. The Vale would not march, but it would lend gold, men in shadows, and perhaps more importantly, legitimacy. She summoned Maester Vyman and ordered a document written, a declaration that Jon Snow was a foreign prince, unfit to inherit northern lands. That declaration would be sent to every great house, especially to the south, and one copy, sealed and marked with a sigil of a lion, went straight to Cersei Lannister. Yup, she just handed a Targaryen-shaped gift to the Mad Queen of the South. Buckle up. Down in King's Landing, Cersei read the Raven with a slow, poisonous smile. The wolves devour their own, wonderful. She raised her cup and toasted the messenger. Let them bleed. And when the dragons weep, we strike. But she wasn't the only one watching. Varys sat in the shadows, scribbling his own letters. The true heir of ice and fire, he whispered, raised with honor, tempered by the cold. Maybe he is the one. Back in Winterfell, Daenerys grew impatient. You're hesitating, she told Jon. Why? Because every step I take, someone bleeds, he answered. You were not made to serve, she said. You were made to lead. You carry the blood of kings, Jon looked away. So did my father. Look where it got him, she stepped closer. He died for honor. Would you die for peace? Jon didn't answer. But in his silence the battle began. Robb moved first. Under cover of snow, his forces marched on Carhold, a loyal house to Jon. The keep was burned. Men hung from the battlements. And with it, Robb sent a message. Winterfell belongs to the living, not the dead Targaryen prince you shelter. Jon stood before the charred remains of House Karstark. Teeth clenched, fury barely contained. I won't kill him, he told Daenerys. He's still my brother. Then I will, she said coldly. Because if you won't protect your crown, I will. That night Jon told Ghost to stay behind. He rode north with a dozen riders, not to fight, but to speak, again. But the path was blocked. Arya Stark. She appeared like a shadow on the snow, dressed in grey leathers, needle at her side. Her face was unreadable. You're not going to Robb, she said flatly. I have to try. He doesn't want your words. He wants your head. You think this is still a game of honor? She stepped closer. If you go to him now, you die. And we lose everything. Jon narrowed his eyes. You're not stopping me. I'm warning you, she said, because I already tried. I stood in front of Robb and told him you were still his brother. He said, he's not my blood, and I saw it. The hate in his eyes. Jon's heart twisted. He hates me, Arya nodded. Because he thinks you've taken everything. And what do you think? She didn't answer at first, then whispered, I think you were meant for more. But if you don't fight for it, someone else will take it from you. Just then Drogon roared in the distance. A dark shape soared above the tree line. The dragons had taken to the skies, because Daenerys had moved without Jon's consent. She had flown to the Dreadfort and she wasn't coming to talk. If you thought things couldn't get worse, think again. Get worse. Think again. The night sky above the Dreadfort turned orange before the roar ever reached the ears of the men below. Flames rippled across the snow, melting centuries of cold in seconds as Drogon screamed through the sky like a god unchained. Robb Stark had never seen a dragon in flight. He'd heard stories, warnings, even rumors. But stories didn't prepare you for the terror of watching your home, your stronghold, go up in fire and death. Daenerys didn't come to speak. She came to make an example, and she did. The gates burst open as fire poured down. Screams echoed through the freezing courtyard. The banners of House Bolton, now redrawn under Robb's True North, were consumed in seconds. Men ran. Archers fired arrows that turned to ash mid-air. Inside, Robb fought to get his men organized, but chaos doesn't listen to commands. He turned toward the sky and shouted, Get the women and children out! Too late. Drogon landed in the main yard, wings spread like a beast from a child's nightmare. His body pulsed with heat, and from behind him walked Daenerys Stormborn, Queen of Nothing. Yet her eyes searched the fires until they found him. Robb. His sword was drawn. He didn't run. This is my land, he growled. You won't take it! Daenerys didn't answer. She simply raised her hand. Drogon inhaled. No, Jon arrived just as the fire did. The wind howled behind him, his horse nearly collapsing from the ride. He'd left Arya behind, ignored her warning. He hadn't believed Daenerys would do it. Not to Robb. But the smell of scorched flesh and stone crushed his doubt into ash. He stumbled through the wreckage, heart pounding, eyes searching. He found Robb in the courtyard, alive, barely. His armor was scorched, half his face blackened with burns. The fire had not killed him, but it had broken him. Jon dropped to his knees. What did she do? Robb's one good eye blinked open. He coughed blood. Your queen, he rasped, brought the fire. Robb, you let her come. He coughed again hard and his voice cracked. You chose her, and now. You'll burn too. Jon stood there, frozen, the weight of guilt pressing down like the snow above the godswood. This wasn't peace. This wasn't unity. This was annihilation. And Daenerys, she stood on the steps of the Dreadfort, her face unreadable as the fires reflected in her eyes. You told me you didn't want a war, she said as Jon approached her. But wars don't care what we want, only what we do. You killed my brother. His voice shook with fury. You attacked without my command. He would have gathered his armies and marched on us within days, she snapped. You saw the ravens. The lords were turning. If we waited, we'd be the ones burning. Jon stared at her like she was a stranger. I trusted you. And I trusted you to take the crown you were born for. You hesitated. So I ended the threat. He stepped forward, voice low. You didn't end a threat. You started a war. Stop, just breathe. This is the turning point. Jon Snow torn between duty, love, and legacy. Just watch the last of his blood family burn under dragonfire, and not at the hand of his enemies, but by the woman who claims to love him. Back in Winterfell, the fallout hit fast. Sansa confronted Arya in the crypts, both of them trembling with rage. She burned him, Arya said. Our brother. He betrayed Jon, Sansa replied. It was always going to end like this. Arya's eyes narrowed. Oh, you wanted it to end like this. Outside, ravens flew in every direction. Some carried pleas, others carried warnings. But all of them told one truth. Robb Stark, the young wolf, had fallen. And the North? It was cracking open. In King's Landing, Cersei read the news with trembling hands. She burned a Stark, she whispered. Perhaps there's more of her father in her after all. She turned to Qyburn. Find the sellswords. Every last one of them. If the Targaryens want war, they'll choke on it. In the Vale, Lysa Arryn refused to send knights, but Littlefinger smiled. The wolves devour themselves. All we must do is wait, and Varys. He now believed. Fire and ice, he whispered. She is the fire, but he is the ice, and only one will survive. Back in the north, Jon returned to Winterfell carrying Robb's sword, burned, bent, and broken. He placed it before Ned's statue and said nothing. The hall was quiet until Daenerys entered. Some bowed. Some did not, and Jon, he looked up, face pale, voice calm. Leave, she blinked. What? Leave Winterfell. You've lost their hearts. I saved your kingdom. You burned it. He stepped closer. And I don't know if I can stop you. But I won't follow you. She laughed softly at first, then bitterly. Then you're no king. You're just another scared boy hiding behind a name. He didn't flinch. And you're just another conqueror. With that, she left. The alliance was over. But what came next? Something worse. Because in the shadow of the wall, a white raven flew. Winter was no longer coming. It had arrived, and the Night King had seen the fire in the north. Snow fell in sheets thick as wool and cold as memory. Winterfell stood quiet beneath its burden, its walls frozen over with silence. But the silence didn't last. The gates slammed open before dawn. Jon stood in the yard, his breath visible, his expression unreadable. Arya appeared beside him, cloak whipping in the wind. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The message was already in his hand. A white raven. The citadel had confirmed it. Winter was no longer coming. It had come. And with it, something else, something older, colder, and far more terrifying than any dragon queen or northern war. From the wall came a raven even more urgent. Eastwatch had fallen. The Night King was on the move. And this time, he didn't walk alone, he flew. On the back of Viserion, the ice-breathing terror Daenerys had lost beyond the wall. The dead had wings now, and they were headed south, straight for the chaos Jon had tried to contain. But Winterfell was divided. In the great hall, Jon laid out the map, hands shaking slightly as he placed the dark stones representing the army of the dead. We don't have time for more war between ourselves. Robb is dead. The true north is shattered. But if we don't unite now, we all burn, or worse, we freeze. Some lords nodded. Lady Mormont stood proud. The north follows you, Jon Snow, or whatever name you carry now. But not all were so willing. Sir Roderick of House Serwyn leaned forward. What of the Dragon Queen? She burns our kin one day, and now we're meant to kneel the next. She's not your queen anymore, Jon replied flatly. That stunned the hall. Arya narrowed her eyes. You cast her out? She crossed a line. And I won't follow fire that destroys what it claims to save. Murmurs rippled through the room. But before it could turn into debate, the doors opened, and Sansa entered. She'd returned from the Vale with more than news. She came with men, 2,000 Arryn knights riding under the falcon banner. She said little, just nodded to Jon. You have my support, she said. For now. Sansa had learned to speak like Cersei and smile like her mother. Cold, controlled, dangerous. Jon didn't trust the look in her eyes, but right now, survival mattered more than trust. Across the north, the message spread. Winterfell would fight, and then The unthinkable. Daenerys returned. She didn't ride Drogon this time. She arrived on foot, cloaked in furs and escorted only by Ser Jorah and a few unsullied. No flames, no fire. Just frost and silence. She asked for Jon. He met her in the Godswood. "You were right," she said. "I let vengeance guide me. I became something I swore I'd never become." Jon studied her face. The rage had gone, but so had the fire in her eyes. "I've seen what happens when the dead walk," she continued, "and I know what I've lost. I won't lose everything else." Jon's jaw clenched. "You killed my brother." "I know," she whispered. "I can't forget that. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to help me end this, together. And here we go again. This is the moment where alliances could reform or collapse." Jon held more power than ever, but trust? That was in short supply. And forgiveness? Even shorter. Still, the dead didn't care about family politics. They were coming, and the first wave was already near. A raven arrived from last hearth. It had fallen. Every man, woman, hand-child slaughtered and turned. The umbers were now whites, and they marched for Winterfell. The War Council reconvened that night. Jon stood at its head. Daenerys at his side, though distant, Arya paced. Sansa listened. Gendry had arrived from the Stormlands with a handful of Baratheon loyalists. Sam Tarly, now bearded and battle-worn, offered strategies from the citadel. Even Tyrion came, having fled King's Landing when he realized Cersei had no intention of ever sending aid north. "We have maybe 4 days," Jon said. "Before they reach us? Then we fight," Daenerys said. "No," Sansa countered. "We survive. There's no survival without a battle," Arya added. Tyrion stood slowly. "We've all lost someone. We've all been broken. But if we fall here, there is no one left to remember us." "Okay, hold on. Let's talk real quick. This isn't just another battle. This is the Night King marching into a fractured north. The Stark family is barely held together by threads. A dragon queen stands outside the wall she once burned. And Jon Snow? He's about to face the one enemy that can't be reasoned with, forgiven, or forgotten. But here's the twist. The Night King doesn't just want to destroy. He wants to convert. And among the whites? Robb Stark now marches Blue Eye's burned armor, raised by the Night King. Jon finds out the night before the battle. A white scout was captured. Not just any white, Grey Wind. Robb's direwolf, dead undead, eyes glowing like twin moons. Jon stares at the creature in horror, then turns to Daenerys. "We're not just fighting monsters. We're fighting ghosts," Arya whispers. "Robb..." Jon says nothing, but in his heart he knows the Night King raised his brother. And now he must kill him again. And the final image before the battle? A wall of snow and bones approaching from the tree line. The wind howls, and in the distance, a second dragon roar answers Drogon's cry. It began in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses on your chest, makes your breath shallow, your heart race, your skin itch with waiting. Winterfell was ready, at least as ready as it could be. The trenches were dug. The walls were lined with dragonglass. Archers lined the battlements, eyes wide, hands shaking. Below them, unsullied stood in perfect rows. Northern men beside them, some praying, others too numb to try. The Vale Knights flanked the western side. Gendry's smiths had armed every man and woman with something that could kill the dead, and above it all Jon stood on the battlements, Ghost beside him, wind tearing through his cloak. He could see the tree line in the distance, the black line of death creeping closer. And behind that line, Robb, or what was left of him. Robb's face was burned, cracked, frozen over, but the eyes, they glowed that icy blue. His direwolf Grey Wind marched ahead of him, jaws open in a silent snarl. Jon didn't speak. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. Daenerys landed Drogon behind the walls, armor wrapped around her like a second skin. Rhaegal now flown by Arya. Yes, Arya hovered above. She had demanded it. If the dead raised Robb, she'd said, then I'll burn them myself. She had no Valyrian blood, just rage, and it seemed to be enough. And then, the first scream, it came from the East Trench. A white had slipped through. Then another. Then 50. The dead weren't waiting. They never waited. Jon drew Longclaw. The battle began. Drogon soared through the sky, his fire lighting up the dark. Rhaegal followed, Arya gripping the saddle tight, face pale but eyes locked in. The dragons swept over the front lines, burning hundreds of whites to ash, but it barely made a dent. The dead just kept coming. In the yard, Sansa organized the fallback lines. Sam fought beside Podrick, barely holding his blade straight. Gendry led the charge at the western gate. Tyrion surprisingly took up a spear. "For once," he muttered, "I'd like to survive a night in the north without being pissed on by the gods." But the true fight? It was Jon's. Because through the chaos, through the burning trenches and the screaming men, he saw him. Robb, he wasn't running. He wasn't charging. He was walking, calm, terrifying, unstoppable. Jon pushed through the battlefield, cutting down wights left and right. "Out of my way!" he shouted, blood spraying across the snow. Behind him, Ghost lunged into the chaos, tearing into undead like a beast possessed. And then Jon was there, face to face with his brother. Except it wasn't Robb anymore, it was the shell, the corpse, the weapon. But when Robb turned his head, Jon hesitated, just for a second, because the face, it still looked like him. The older brother, who once taught him to hold a sword. The one who laughed when Jon beat him at archery. The one who bled beside him in the yard as children. That second almost cost Jon his life. Robb lunged, sword sweeping low. Jon barely dodged. The clash of steel echoed through the yard. And now they fought. Not for honor, not for crowns, but for humanity itself. Robb was faster than any man should be. Stronger, deadlier. Every blow Jon blocked sent tremors up his arm. His breath came short. His vision blurred. This isn't just a wight, he realized. This is the Night King's message. But then, Arya dropped from the sky. Rhaegal swooped low, and she leapt from his back, twin daggers in hand. She hit the ground between them, slashing at Robb with a snarl. "I'll finish it," she hissed. Jon grabbed her wrist. "No, you hesitate and we all die," she screamed, but Jon shook his head. "I won't kill him like this," Arya's eyes narrowed. "Then you'd better do it your way now." Behind them, the Night King watched from a distance, standing at the tree line, silent, smiling. He raised a hand, and more of the dead began to rise from the crypts of Winterfell. Yes. The Stark dead, Lyanna, Rickard, Brandon, Ned's tomb cracked. Sansa, still in the Great Hall, heard the rumble and turn just as the floor split open. "This isn't happening," she whispered. But it was. Winterfell's past had turned against its future. And Daenerys. She saw the Night King finally reveal himself. She turned Drogon in the sky, fire building in her throat. She flew straight at him, screaming, "Dracarys!" Flames engulfed the clearing. Smoke swallowed the Night King, but when it cleared, he was still standing, untouched. Daenerys gasped, and the Night King threw his spear. Drogon dove. Too slow. The spear hit his wing. Daenerys screamed as Drogon crashed to the ground outside the gates. Tumbling into the snow, she was thrown from the saddle, dazed, bleeding. The dead turned. They saw her, and they charged. Jon looked up from the battlefield, saw her fall. He ran. Through fire, through blood, through death. He reached her just as the first wight leapt, and he cut it in half. Daenerys coughed, looked up at him. "Why?" "You're not the enemy," he said. "Not tonight," she reached for him. "Then fight with me." And for the first time since Robb's death, Jon nodded. They stood together, and behind them, Arya, Bran, Tyrion, Sansa, the last Starks, the last Targaryens, the last Hope, and the Night King. He began to walk toward them, no fear, no words, only death. No fear, no words, only death. The Night King moved like a shadow given form, slow, deliberate, inevitable. Snow swirled around him, but none of it touched him. His eyes locked on Jon Snow, not the dragons, not the armies, him. As if he knew that all of this, the war, the fire, the fall of Robb Stark, had been building to this exact moment. Jon stepped forward, longclaw in hand. Daenerys, bloodied, stood beside him. Arya flanked the right. Ghost, limping, snarled at his side. Behind them, the shattered remains of the northern forces held what ground they could. The walls of Winterfell barely standing, but none of it mattered, because this was no longer a battle for the north. This was a reckoning for blood. For choices, for truth. The Night King stopped 10 feet from Jon. His mouth didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply raised a single hand, and every corpse on the battlefield began to stir. Not just the dead soldiers. Not just the wights, but Robb, Rickard, Stark, Brandon, Lyanna, even Ned. The crypts had fully risen. Jon's breath hitched. "He's not just killing us," he whispered. "He's erasing us." Beside him, Bran spoke for the first time in hours, his voice distant, echoing as if it came from another realm. "He doesn't want the throne. He doesn't want land. He wants silence. He wants the story to end. Jon gritted his teeth. Then we don't let it. He ran straight at the Night King. The two clashed in an explosion of steel and frost. Longclaw met the Night King's ice blade, sending a shockwave through the air that shattered frozen trees. Every swing of Jon's blade was fueled by fury, by loss, by the burning image of Robb's face, twisted and cold, by the memory of Ned's voice, by the weight of every man and woman who had followed him into this nightmare. But the Night King didn't flinch. He countered. Blocked, cut. Deep, Jon fell once, twice. Blood stained the snow. Daenerys screamed from behind him. Arya tried to break through the circle of whites protecting the Night King. But even she, the fastest killer in Westeros, was forced back. Jon rose again. Spitting blood, he slashed forward, only for the Night King to knock Longclaw from his hands. Then he raised his ice blade, and just as he brought it, down Ghost lunged. The direwolf slammed into the Night King's side, biting, tearing, buying Jon precious seconds. Jon used to roll, grab his blade, and now! Bran shouted, and suddenly Bran's eyes turned white, warging into the ravens, into the trees, into the past. In that moment, Bran found it, the truth. The truth Jon had never been told, because the Night King, he wasn't just some cursed first man. He was a Stark. The first Stark. Bran whispered it through the wind. His voice carried across the battlefield. He was the one who made the pact with the children of the forest. He was meant to guard the realm forever. But when the world turned against him, he chose death over betrayal. And now, he wants his name erased. Jon heard it and froze. The Night King looked at him just for a heartbeat, and Jon saw it. Not just rage, pain, centuries of it, but he didn't hesitate again. Jon struck straight through the chest. The blade, forged in Valyrian fire, slid deep, and the Night King shattered like glass. The shockwave knocked Jon back. Every white screamed in unison, then dropped. Silence. Just silence. Then grey wind collapsed. Robb's body crumpled, and from the crypts, the dead lay still. It was over. They had won. But victory felt nothing like triumph. Jon stood in the middle of the ruined yard, covered in blood, surrounded by death. The fires were out. The sky was still dark. Winterfell was broken. Daenerys limped to him. "You did it," she said. He shook his head. "We did." She stared at him, eyes glimmering. "You know what comes next?" Jon looked at the shattered pieces of the Night King. "I don't want it. You're the heir. The North is yours. The realm will follow." But before he could answer, Arya stepped forward. "No," she said. "He may have won the battle, but we don't trust fire anymore." Daenerys stiffened. "Excuse me?" Arya drew her dagger. "You burned our brother. You wanted a throne. Now you want him?" Sansa entered the yard. Her cloak was singed, her face streaked with tears. "She's right," Sansa said. "You can't stay here. Not now." Daenerys looked at Jon. "Is this what you want?" He looked at the walls of Winterfell, now scorched, at the faces of the people he loved, torn between survival and suspicion. "I want peace," he said. "But I won't force it." Daenerys stepped back. Her face cracked, then hardened. "So be it," she turned, called Drogon, climbed onto his back, and without another word, she left just like that. And Jon? He stayed. Winterfell was his now, not because of blood, not because of fire, but because he had faced death itself and said no, but peace. Peace never lasts in Westeros, because as the snows began to melt and spring peeked through frost, another raven arrived from King's Landing. Cersei was marching north, and she wasn't coming alone. The first green leaf sprouted in the Godswood 2 weeks after the Battle of Winterfell. A sign of spring, some said. A symbol of rebirth. But Jon Snow had seen enough death to know better. Spring meant Cersei was coming, and with her, the Golden Company, thousands strong, with elephants this time. Gyorden's fleet sailed from the narrow sea, and behind her, spies, whispers, alliances made in the dark. The Queen of Ashes was not coming to make peace. She was coming to claim what remained. Winterfell, still healing, became a fortress again. Broken walls were patched. The dead were buried. Robb laid in the crypts beside Ned, grey wind beside him. Jon stood over the graves for hours, said nothing. Felt everything. Arya watched him from a distance. "You're not sleeping," she said. He nodded. "I see him in my dreams. The way he looked when I last saw him, and the way he looked when he died again." Arya didn't answer. She just stood beside him, hand on the hilt of her dagger. "You know what's coming," she said. "She'll offer you a crown. Or a coffin." Jon's voice was barely a whisper. "Then maybe I should be the one to decide what she gets." But it wasn't just Jon preparing for the final confrontation. Sansa had summoned the bannermen, those who still lived. House Manderley, House Reed, House Glover shamed into returning. Even the Vale Knights stayed. But their trust was thin. Too many deaths, too much blood, too many secrets. "We need unity," Sansa told Jon, "but you can't give it." He looked at her, wounded. "Why?" "Because they don't see you as one of us anymore. They did. Before all this, before her, Daenerys hadn't been seen since she fled Winterfell, but her shadow lingered. Every fire that crackled in the hearth reminded them. Every burned stone, every empty seat at the table. But what no one expected, she returned, not alone. With her came a small force of loyal Unsullied and the Dothraki who remained. She rode no dragon, wore no crown, but her presence ignited the old tension like wildfire on dry brush. She stood before the council in Winterfell's main hall, face scarred, eyes cold. "I did not come to fight," she said. "I came because you cannot face her alone." Sansa folded her hands. "You came because if Cersei takes the north, there's no kingdom left to rule." Daenerys didn't deny it. Jon stepped between them. "We need each other." One last time, the uneasy alliance formed, but not without conditions. Sansa's voice echoed in the hall. "If we win this, the north stays independent. No more bending the knee." Daenerys looked at Jon and nodded. It was done. They prepared for war. And war came faster than expected. Cersei's fleet struck Bear Island first, burned it to the ground, sent a raven with a single message. "I warned you." Jon knew what she meant. She hadn't forgotten the Targaryen blood in him. He was the last threat to her claim, not Daenerys, him. So he made a choice. He would ride south. Take the fight to her. End it before more northern blood spilled on snow. Arya insisted on going. So did Tyrion, and so did Sansa. "I have learned more from Cersei than anyone else," she told Jon, "and she won't expect me." They rode with 2,000 men, quiet, swift, through secret roads, toward King's Landing. But they weren't the only ones moving. Varys had returned from hiding with him, Bran, and Bran had seen something terrifying. "There's no Iron Throne," he whispered to Jon in the dark. "Only fire, only bones." Jon didn't understand. "You mean she'll burn it?" "No," Bran said, eyes white. "You will." Those words followed Jon to the gates of the capital. Cersei waited atop the red keep, dressed in black, crown shining in the sunset. Her army lined the walls. Euron stood beside her, grinning like a devil. But Jon didn't ride to the front. He snuck through the tunnels beneath the city, led by Arya and Tyrion, into the depths of the keep, through catacombs long abandoned, into the heart of the dragon skull chamber, where Cersei waited. She stood alone, her crown gone, her sword at her side. "You're hard to kill," she said. Jon raised Longclaw. "So are you." But before the blade could rise, she spoke. "I know what you are. I know your name. I know your weakness." He froze. "You want peace. But peace dies with me, and you won't kill me." She stepped forward. "Because if you do, you become me." And Jon hesitated again until Sansa entered behind him. With her, Arya, Cersei's eyes widened. "Starks, Queens," Sansa said coldly. "You came to beg for your bastard's mercy?" Arya stepped forward. "We came to finish what you started." And in a flash, Arya drove her dagger into Cersei's heart. Not from the front, from the back. Quick, silent, deadly. Cersei choked, turned, fell, and that was it. The lioness died not on a throne, but on cold stone alone. As fire began to rise behind them, Drogon had arrived, drawn by blood, by legacy, by the smell of Targaryen death. He landed on the ruins of the Red Keep and screamed into the night. And what did Jon do? He walked up the final steps to the melted, shattered remains of the Iron Throne, and he didn't sit. He looked down, took the dagger from Arya's hand, and drove it into the throne itself. No more. The throne split in two, melted, destroyed forever. And from that moment, Westeros was reborn. Not under kings, not under queens, but under something. New. Councils. Choice. Peace. Jon didn't take the crown. He went north, farther than the wall, with Ghost with a broken sword. With no name left. Sansa ruled the north, Arya sailed west. Daenerys disappeared, never seen again, and the realm? It remembered, because Jon Snow had done what no king ever could. He walked away and gave the realm back to its people, and gave the realm back to its people.